But
You saw my response to the other folder.
Yeah, that's the forge, huh?
yeah.
Was that a new issue to you? Or you're
Very new to me.
Oh, okay, I never heard, yeah.
And I don't know why we have an issue that's not working. That's what I would try.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got those issues, you should. We don't have time for this. We got 5 minutes.
But I gotta take that to my office.
Oh, man, I know. I figure it's gonna be exciting, you know, the way that it ends on Saturday.
What? That's crazy.
Okay. I'll ask you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sensitive, this Chromebook. This Chromebook is sensitive, and it's deciding.
It's a problem with masks, I can't really hear what you're saying.
I'm saying this Chromebook is sensitive when I try to adjust the images. It
Oh.
does it way more than I want it to.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Are you the lone ranger today
I
from G?
think Charlie's gonna be
I
on.
think he's not, yeah.
Yeah.
He's coming too.
No, he won't be in, I don't think. but
No,
he'll be
he's not
online.
coming. He's not in the office at all this week, right?
Right.
Did you guys end up coming back Saturday after, like evening? Did you get back to Lewes Saturday evening?
We got back about 8 o'clock.
And what did you do in terms of parking?
We went to this metro stop, which was one stop away from the
Okay.
G line.
Yeah, he probably worked out better than us.
Yeah.
We ended up having to take a school bus from like some Villa Julia, just common. You know, I meant to tell you, you probably could have found a friend that had if you had a BMW fob, you were right there.
Yeah.
You could have just parked right there.
Taking over. We had a switch, and I'm like, I'm gonna myself over.
Oh, good for you.
Taking over.
Eddie Brown.
Yeah.
He's the first person we ran into. Yeah, saw some people.
All right, we ready? Half a second.
Yeah.
7 miles.
I've got 5:59, so.
Yeah, that's what I got too.
I realized half of what I do today, I can use for the other one myself.
Good.
So it's like, you just flip it.
Good. I talked to Max tonight, and he goes, why is
Yeah. Yeah, so. just be behind.
So he and I agreed we're supposed to have lunch tomorrow. I said, let's just make it a working.
Okay, well. Yeah, 'cause it was. Yeah.
Good evening. It is 6 o'clock on August the 30th, and we are here for a public hearing regarding two different items that have been put forward by the Planning Commission. For those of us here in the room, all of us at the table have been vaccinated, and we'll probably be taking our masks off during this hearing, up to us. If you are, we're asking people to stay masked if they have not been vaccinated, or for any personal preference, but I will be taking my mask off. So it's up to everybody as to how you wish to proceed. Okay. So the first item on the agenda is, thank you all for coming out this evening. And first item on the agenda is a presentation on a public hearing regarding CZ-2-21 lands of the Lewes Middle School for a change of zone from CFE Community Facilities Educational Zone to CG General Commercial Zone for Sussex County Tax Map 335-8.11-30.00 portion thereof. This is a lot line adjustment that came before the Planning Commission that was discovered as a result of the planning for the new school. And there was actually the building, the gas station actually was encroaching on lands that belonged to the school, and this is a lot line adjustment to correct that, I believe. I would ask Janelle to comment.
So yeah, this is the change of zone to make sure that when a lot line adjustment comes forward, the property is not split zoned. So the intent is to rezone 4,233 square feet of land from CFE, Community Facilities Educational, to GC, General Commercial. The Planning Commission did hold a meeting on July 21st of this year. At that meeting, they did recommend approval of the change of zone. And again, this is just for slightly over 4,000 square feet to allow for a clean lot line adjustment in the future. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Janelle. And Zach, are you here on behalf of the school district, or?
Yes, for the record, I'm Zach Crouch with Davisville and Fred, I represent the Cape Liton School District. And that is correct. I mean, when we did the survey out there for the new middle school that's going there, we found this encroachment, which our record shows probably 20, 25 years ago. So just to correct it, Brian Bassett has talked to the property owners. Of course, they're happy with it because we're fixing their problem, but they're, again, to make it pretty much smooth as far as the split zonings and stuff. We struck a line. We knew exactly how much needed to be rezoned. Once that's done, we'll go into the city with a minor lot line adjustment, but it doesn't affect anything whatsoever. It actually brings that property into conformance for the most part as far as the setbacks and stuff, so that's where we're at.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are here to hear from the public, but before we do that, are there any questions from the table regarding this? Okay. Hearing none, we'd welcome comments from the public if there are any. Is there anyone online, Melody? And do we have any hands raised? Okay. Looks like there are no public comments on that. So we'll leave the record open. I expect this will be on our September 13th agenda. And we'll leave the record open until noon on Friday before the 10th of September, should anyone wish to comment further. Okay. With that, I think we can then move on to the next item.
So
Thank you.
the next item is a major subdivision plan for the final subdivision for the Olde Town at Whites Pond, formerly known as Whites Pond Meadow, to be located off of Freeman Hwy and Monroe Avenue. The property is zoned R2, and the Sussex County Tax Map is District 335, Map 8, Parcel 46. This is proposing an 85 single-family lot subdivision with amenities, open space, and site improvement. The property consists of slightly under 37 acres. It's 36.943 acres. There were a number of items submitted as part of the record, and they are all available on the website. The Planning Commission recommend approval of the final subdivision plan at the July 21st, 2021 meeting. They did so with 4 recommendations and 7 conditions, and I'm just going to read all of them just so everybody in attendance understands. The recommendations are that the signal is installed as Monroe Avenue is made passable. The second one is to encourage DRBA to replace the fence along Freeman Highway with a fence more compatible with fences along Freeman Highway. An example is a split rail fence. The third recommendation is approval of the waiver to reduce the street width to 28 feet. The fourth recommendation is approval of subdivision without the entrance permit. There are 7 conditions. The first one is access to the development is provided when the signal is installed. 2, at least 10 types of plant species are planted in the stormwater management ponds. 3, the sugar maple trees are replaced with an oak tree or other native species. 4, the street trees are more evenly spaced throughout the development and added along lots 50 to 55, 60 to 64, and 72 to 77. The trees shall not interfere with utilities. 5, require an open connection on Monroe Avenue to the Schofield development. 6, the amenities are for the use of Olde Town at Whites Pond residents and guests. 7, additional trees, shrubs, or fencing shall be installed along Freeman Highway to provide a continuous buffer between Freeman Highway and the rear of the homes. This application began in 2018. It did go through the State Plus process. It's meeting all the code requirements for the subdivision. And again, there's a waiver for the street width, and council already granted a waiver from the 0.5 slope for the storm drain pipe that was granted several months ago. So tonight, as part of the final, is consideration of the waiver for the reduction in the street width and consideration of approval without the entrance permit. Staff would note it's kind of difficult for them to get an entrance permit without an approved plan. So this is something actually we're looking at amending in code. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Janelle. So once again, we are here to hear from the public, but if there are questions from the table, perhaps we could take those first. Do you have questions at this point, Tim?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to direct questions to both the engineer for the developer and also for the city, Josh. And I'll leave it to you two to figure out who's going to answer what. My first question is to be focused on the stormwater management. And I have a keen sense that from looking at the plans, and I feel like I'm fairly familiar with them, that the stormwater management ponds that will be constructed as part of the development will in fact drain into what is known as Whites Pond. And what is not clear to me is if the existing stormwater management ponds that are in the Schofield community, which is in the county, if they too are draining into Whites Pond. I have a sense that they are, but since I did not see the site plan for that, I'm not prepared to make that assumption.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Ring Gardner, professional engineer and principal of the firm Davis, Bone, and Friedel. So to answer your question, Olde Town and Whites Pond do interconnect into each other, and they drain into Whites Pond. Schofield ponds also interconnect to each other, and they also discharge into Whites Pond.
Okay.
As part of the whole stormwater report, all the ponds were analyzed together to show no adverse impact into Whites Pond, and that was all reviewed and approved by the Sussex Conservation District.
Okay, thank you. And Josh, I'm putting you on the spot here about this particular issue. And the reason I'm focusing on the stormwater management asset here is because, in fact, we have, as far as I know, this is the only community that we have in the city where the pond, which is going to receive the stormwater, is in fact a pond that's going to serve both county residents as well as city. And in addition to that, I believe I understand from attending a lot of these city meetings that I think there's a connection DelDOT has with their drainage from Kings Highway that runs over in the same direction. And what I want to be assured of is that the capacity of the pond and its ability to move water into the canal where it eventually drains is satisfied by the size of the outfall pipe. I know that the grade of the pipe has been accommodated by a request. My question is about the capacity of that pipe.
So I know you asked Josh this question, I think I'm a little more perfect to answer that. So,
Sure.
Not only does DelDOT drain into that pond, DRVA drains into that pond, and so does the city of Lewes.
Yep.
So that pond receives a fair amount of water, and all that was analyzed as part of the review, because again, the same question you asked, the same one the Conservation District asked, and then we had to prove that that pond can handle all of the runoff from both these developments. So that has been reviewed to the satisfaction of the Sussex Conservation District, and they have no qualms with the drainage. And furthermore, there's maintenance agreements that are starting to become in place that'll handle the shared maintenance responsibilities of Whites Pond and everything else. So while that's a private matter, those are
Right.
in place.
And that was one of my other
I
questions.
kind of figured that's kind of where we're going to next.
Yeah.
I thought I'd just answer that
Thank
at
you.
the time.
So those agreements will be something that the developer will put in place with the different HOAs that
Yes,
are going to be there in that
Correct,
property?
and they'll be based upon their drainage areas going to that pond, so
So there'll be a proration?
proration based on drainage areas.
I see. And is there any, okay, so I think what you're suggesting is that my concerns about that pond and its capacity have been already addressed, studied, and
Yes, sir.
have been satisfied.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Josh, you okay with all this?
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
Thank you. Moving on. Let's talk about BPW-related issue. Again, in your plan, I noticed that there is a feature in the wastewater side that calls for a grinder or grinders to be installed in this subdivision. And our recent history here in Lewes has proven that on at least an occasion, we do have problems with grinders. And I want to make sure that that is in fact something that is based upon, that engineering is current and is the best management practice that we can have for this subdivision.
Yeah, so Tim, the grinders aren't serving Whites Pond. They're serving the few parcels adjacent to the north. And there are existing grinder pumps, and we're just kind of cleaning up that system. And I think we're taking at least one of the existing grinder pumps offline and tying it into the gravity system of Whites Pond. But there are no proposed new grinder pumps. Any of them are existing.
I see. So they're all existing. All right. I must have seen on the plan the proposed one that caught my attention.
Yeah, and
So it is a gravity-fed system in the community?
completely inside the community. And then the grinder pumps are single parcel grinder pumps. Or
Right.
Those grinder pumps serve the two residential areas.
Yeah.
And the
And the commercial.
district.
yes, yes.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's the commercial one you're adding on to as a
Commercial's
gravity.
coming off, commercial's going gravity.
Correct.
That's what I thought.
Cunningham houses state grinders.
Okay,
Yep.
thank
And-
you.
And then we're also adding a stub out for future connection down towards the Gibbs property. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple more questions.
I'm here all night. Hopefully less than an hour, but I am here all night.
Thank you. I know there is a stub street, and it's called Hay Wagon.
Yes, sir.
And I know it's a privately owned road. I understand that. I understand it's going to serve the pool house and the swimming pool. I understand that design. My question is, do I have assurances that the fact that the closest fire hydrant is at the corner of Paddock Way is in fact is close enough to address whatever concerns we might have associated with fire protection
Yeah,
at that building?
Fire marshal reviewed these plans, fire marshal granted approval, so they're satisfied with the hydrant spacing and locations for that amenity and within the subdivision.
Okay, so the plan that the fire marshal would have reviewed was in fact the most recent plan that we have
Yes, sir.
in front of us? Okay, thank you. I noticed that the pool house, or whatever you call that, in the notes, does not have fire suppression
Correct.
in that building. where are you going to, where would the chemicals be kept that would be used for typical pool maintenance?
There'll be a small, there's a mechanical storage room, there'll be a small amount of chemicals, and they're small, it's not a very big pool. So the fire risk isn't very high, so that's why the building doesn't need to be sprinklered.
I
It
see.
doesn't rate a high classification for the building.
Right. It's a small building, actually, just
Correct, it's small, yeah.
less than,
Like
not-
2,500 square feet plus or
Yeah.
minus, something a little high there.
yeah, thank you. And let's see, I do have another question, and it has to do with the street designs.
Okay.
And what I am keenly aware of is, of course, that the plan calls for Monroe Avenue and the intersection improvements with turn lanes. I understand that. I'm familiar with that. The road width at Freeman Highway is wider, and then it, in fact, tapers down as you drive southward.
Correct.
On Monroe. And then we have one width for Monroe, and then apparently the side streets,
You have Philly and Paddock Way.
there you go, those are even smaller or narrower
They're
roads.
2 foot narrow, so the city code requires 30 foot
Correct,
face curb to face a curb.
right,
And so Monroe Avenue has been designed to meet that width. And all we asked for was a 2 foot reduction on Paddock Way and Philly Lane. What it does, it allows the extra foot to go into the, what we call the devil strips, for tree plantings and that kind of stuff. So that's, we just transfer the width, the 28 foot, we've used in Harbor Point, we've used it in Mayor's Retreat, I almost called it the other
Right.
name. So it hasn't been an issue, with
I
previous
understand.
applications. So that's what we have requested for this
right.
project.
But it is our ordinance, and that's, yeah.
That's correct.
All right. What is the, I've spent some time out there on the field walking the property, and so I feel like I'm pretty conversant about it. What is the plan for the wider stub, that's currently a stub, of Monroe Street in Schofield?
So,
Because I've measured that, and that's just shy of 30 feet wide.
it should have been 30 feet wide.
It's 20, yeah, it's 29.9.
Design part of the county, so, I mean, it should have been, I mean, I don't have the design of that particular
Right.
road network with me. But at that particular point, they'll have to do a split taper to tie it all together, so it might be 29 and some change. And location, we'll just make a little field adjustment to kind of make it not look so obvious when you get to that point.
Yeah. One of my concerns here is that this particular entrance coming off of Freeman Highway is going to serve, of course, the residential community. It's going to have connectivity to private roads in Schofield, but we also have commercial property that will be served off this same Monroe extension. And the applicant for that property has not filed with the city, so we don't have a good handle on what his plans are. But we have reason to believe that that property is going to be redeveloped, and it will probably be a more significant commercial enterprise than it is right now.
It's a good guess.
Yeah. My concern for the city is making sure that the demands that will be placed on meeting the new traffic demands that the commercial development will place on us will in fact be satisfied and met by roads that are in fact narrower than what our ordinance requires. And that's a concern of mine.
So Monroe Avenue at design meets the code.
I understand that.
So Monroe Avenue meets the code. So that road we've not asked for, or was not granted a waiver
That's
for
correct.
for that road. So that road meets the code, so.
Correct.
B, the traffic impact study accounted for, I'm gonna get it somewhere wrong, somewhere between 18,000 and 24,000 square feet of commercial was assumed as part of the study. Our entrance plans also assumed that same amount of square footage part of the entrance plan, so the entrances, the four-legged intersection have been designed for that much commercial,
For how many square feet was that?
18 to 24.
Yeah.
Pull the plan out. If you The exact
Right.
number,
No,
I
I've seen that on the plan,
Okay.
too, yeah, yeah.
So it's designed for that much square footage of commercial, plus Old Town, and plus Delta as part of their model had us assume certain amount of traffic coming from Schofield through this site. So all that traffic's been accounted for in the trip generation,
Right.
entrance design, signal design. So I can assure you that that intersection had been designed for future
Right.
build out of the project. Now, when or if Mr. Gibbs or whomever for that parcel comes forward with a site plan, as long as that traffic generation is the same or less than, then obviously the signal is just fine. If it's not, then it's on that applicant to then mitigate whatever additional traffic may or may not have happened. I will tell you this, that the trip generation that comes from a book is much higher than what actually occurs on the ground. So I will tell you that all the trips we've assumed is already overestimated when we actually start to count real traffic versus what a book projects. So there's uber conservativeness in the counts in that design for any future increase in traffic.
What concerns me, Ring, is the fact that at least where the present turnoff for Mr. Gibbs's property is, it is just beyond where Monroe Avenue is at its widest. And should that be, continue to be his entrance to his property, to the redeveloped property?
We can't answer that right now until Mr. Gibbs files an application.
I understand
It's
that.
premature to even ask that question. That's why, we kept the curb cut that he has for the existing parking because that's what he currently has today.
Right.
And that's what, we're obligated to provide is the connection to that. Anything after that is purely speculative.
I understand that.
That I can't answer that question.
I understand that. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm looking out for our interests here. And if we know for sure, we know that that property is going to be redeveloped, and it just makes sense that we take that into consideration at that time, at this time.
Again, we don't know where the building's gonna go. We don't know where everything goes.
I understand that,
Without
right.
having any of that, it's just
I understand all
throw it
that.
against the wall and see what sticks. It's kind of where we're at as far as that goes.
Right.
I think the only thing you'd say is that Mr. Gibbs has been monitoring this development all along.
And he's been participating because he has a vested interest because he currently has an existing business there that has to survive
That's
Right, right,
during and after the development
That's right.
parcel.
yeah.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
thank you, Ray. Are there any other questions from the table?
Actually, Ring, I did have a couple questions just on appreciate the booklet, the final booklet you guys prepared. It's useful, but there's a couple things that were unclear. I remember the Lewes, the other public hearing for the planning commission, this was brought up with one of the conditions being the access between Schofield and this property and the assurances that you have, not with the HOA of Old Town, but with the HOA of Schofield. Can you just remind what assurance is there that you can maintain that?
There are no assurances on the county portion of Monroe Avenue. There's no assurances that I can give you because they're an HOA that has to do what they want to do. So they could ultimately decide, make a vote on the board that they prefer to close Monroe Avenue. And if they do, they'd have to make application A to the fire marshal, because fire marshal has to approve any gated access to any site subdivision. And then B would have to go to planning commission for review and approval. And then the planning commission would determine whether it's something they want to take up as other business or something they could take to a public hearing to get public input on it. And I'm not going to speak for planning and zoning either, but that would be the process. Should the HOA make a decision that they prefer to close their side of Monroe Avenue off? And of course, anything that's formally filed, I think there's a partnership between the city and the county. So I believe at least Ms. Cornwell would be notified if something like that would have been applied for. And the city would have a chance to at least comment on it, imagine at a minimum.
And just for the record, the planning commission you're referring to is the county board.
Yes,
Okay.
right.
Okay. And have you had any initial conversations with their HOA to
There's a
gauge
couple
where they are?
conversations after that public hearing, and I don't want to speak for the board. I don't want to be kind of taken out of context either of the board.
Sure.
I think at one time it was 50-50 or close to it. Those that wanted, those that didn't. I don't know what that feeling is today. May be one way, and after this intersection is approved, it may change a different way. It's so hard to tell what's going to happen. So I have not talked to the board. I don't think Mr. Hammond's talking to the board here later to get an idea of what the temperature of the room is at this time.
Okay, and then the other question I had just was, again, in your booklet, it talked about the quality of the fill, but it wasn't clear to me whether you will use fill, and
We need, I think the last number I saw was about 9,000 cubic yards is the amount of fill that we need to bring in on the site. And part of that was due to sewer, to make sure we had enough cover on the sewer system. And some of that was stormwater to make sure we can maintain the minimum grades for lot grading, road grading to meet all the different codes, whether it's the IRC code for home building or the city's codes for drainage. So it's about 9,000 cubic yards, which is actually pretty close to being balanced. And truthfully, without knowing the contractor, we could probably mine most of that on site, where we would mine out the select dirt and then bury the topsoil in open spaces. It doesn't require structural fill, and then at that point in time, you're not bringing an import at all, but that's what we're showing as an import number. Whether you mine it on site or you bring it in off site, that's a contractor decision of how to construct the site.
As you create those drainage ponds, you may create that much.
Well, no, even those drainage ponds, we're still short 9,000.
Are you still short? Okay. Okay. Ring, did you want to add anything? Or, not Ring, but Nick, did you want to add anything?
I can add just briefly, just to reiterate what Ring said, we can't
Just
take.
identify yourself for the record.
Oh, Nick Hammonds, the developer, and I also, as part of the general partner that developed Schofield. We can't take a position on, how Schofield will react or what they want to do, nor do I think their board, based on, very few conversations about it now, would be able to take a position at this point. So I just want to be clear that we're not prepared to take a position on that, and I don't know that they are at this point either. But as Ring said, there are numerous steps that would have to happen and approvals that would be needed in order to block that entrance off.
May I add a quick follow-up question to that statement? The existing show field, is that is that one HOA for all show field, or is it divided into sections?
It is. It's one HOA. It's 166 units.
Okay, and because I noticed that some of the streets appear to be in there with their final coat, right? They've been all,
Yep.
yeah, and other ones, and as you get back closer to the city side, they were not finished streets.
There's all but one small phase, which is construction phase 3 in Schofield, which likely means nothing to you at this point. But
Yeah.
there's one small phase of, call it 20 or so lots, that does not have a final top coat.
Right.
The balance of the community does.
Is there, Andrew, you mind if I jump in here and
No,
ask
go
a
right
follow-up
ahead.
question? The business of this interconnectivity between the city and the county has been a great concern of mine, and I've made no beans about that. It's been a great concern of mine for several years now. And one of the things, I was present in this room when large numbers of Schofield County residents, of course, showed up, and they expressed great concern about this idea of interconnectivity. And I just listened. I was not a participant. I just listened. And they might be, some of them might be present this evening, but I don't know that to be the case. What I cannot settle in my mind is they were all riled up several years ago, and part of it was the financial exposure that the HOA would have for their private roads to be maintained. And, I don't know if that has been solved by some kind of contribution from the developer, but it was a very real expression of concern several years ago. And I need to get comfortable with this idea of us creating a public road on the city connecting to a private road.
The interconnection has been there and approved by the county. We can't determine at this point what type of traffic's gonna go on, and I would tell you and this is not a statement of fact, but there are people on both sides of the argument, and I can't speak for Janelle, but I think she's probably been in the room many times when the subject of interconnection has come up in any development, and there are, like there are in any HOA,
Sure.
very differing opinions on whether interconnection's good or bad.
I understand.
And those that are on the side that would speak against it would tell you that it's going to create, potential issues there. It's going to create extra traffic on the roads. There are also the positives of it from a safety standpoint. I think many people in Schofield might tell you that they like the idea of being able to more quickly access the city of Lewes, and whether by walking, driving, or
And Nick, I will tell you, I witnessed that myself and my associate here, Carolyn, when we went out there and walked the site and walked down the gravel dirt road that is now would be Monroe. And there were many, I don't want to speak for my friend here, but there were more than one or two people from the Schofield community cutting through that dirt road to get out to Freeman Highway during those few minutes that we were there on the site. So it is being used. And,
right.
Yeah, by your people.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, thank you.
Dick, have you turned over the HOA to the?
We have.
Okay. So it's already in their hands, so.
Yes.
And have they they've been notified, is there any requirement from the county that the residents be notified officially of this kind of interconnectivity proposal?
They're well aware of the interconnectivity proposal. I can't speak for every person in the development, but there are many people that closely follow this development, I believe. And there's also the public hearing notification procedures for those within, I believe, 200 feet of.
Right, and that's what, I know that's.
And both plans, for as long as they've been around, have shown the interconnectivity for the road. So
right, but
it's been there since the development, as far as I can remember, of the development of both subdivisions.
I will speak to that from a firsthand experience of having been in the sales office and looking at the site plan for Schofield. There was no connectivity shown in the site plan for Schofield to Freeman Highway to Monroe Avenue. So that is a matter of fact in the sales office of Schofield. And that was within the last 2 years. So, and I witnessed that myself. That's not hearsay.
No, let me clarify. It doesn't show the road connecting to Freeman Highway. It's going to show that stub road that goes to the property line. And that stub road, I think it's Battle Mixer or something. That stub road has been on the Schofield subdivision plan from almost day one. So there's a stub road that has gone to their property line from the beginning. It doesn't show going to Freeman Highway because they can't, because it's not their property.
It's not their property.
Well, it's the same developer.
Right, but it's a different plan, in different jurisdiction.
Yeah, I know that it's a different jurisdiction, but it would have been shown as a proposed right-of-way or a proposed connectivity at that point in time.
Anne Marie, do you want to comment?
Well, the one thing the point I want to make for the record, as the city's representative on the 5 Points Working Group, is that when the 5 Points Working Group developed its list of 79 or whatever prioritized recommendations, one of those recommendations was that that the city, the county, and DelDOT all continue to support interconnection, because that's what keeps the roads from becoming clogged. Right. So since that is an official recommendation that was accepted by the full working group and as part of DelDOT's plan, I wanted to make sure that's on our record.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Are there any other questions for the table?
I did have one other question, and this is, I mean, not necessarily, you can answer for yourselves, but this is also sort of directed at GMB with respect to the number of waivers that we've been getting requests for on the street widths. And is this strictly a play to get more open space? I mean, is the waiver around the narrowness of the streets, is that really the?
Do you want to talk about the subdivision?
So as part of the subdivision code, Charlie and I think Josh can also talk to it, we're looking at reducing the street width of the road design standards, because we've noticed typically the wider the street, the faster the cars travel through a subdivision.
Reason why?
I'm sorry?
Is that your reason why?
No, that's just one part of the reason. One, it helps reduce the amount of impervious surface that the city is gonna have to deal with, or the development will have to deal with, so we're talking stormwater management, we're talking impervious surface, we're talking about safety and for people. So, most places that have, and this is an older, section of code that you don't see much anymore. Most places have gone to smaller road widths, again, for a number of different reasons. So that's something we are looking at. And then even this would allow for parking on one side of the street.
I have a question, follow-up question to that. If we narrow the road, our right-of-way is still the same width.
That's correct.
Correct.
So I get that, and I can appreciate the benefits of a narrower road. I understand the traffic engineering design, the design benefit of that. It seems to me that we're not asking for upsizing the what I call the tree box area. That grass strip between the back of the curb and the sidewalk. Is that growing in width as the streets are narrowing?
So Charlie is reviewing all of that as we go through the subdivision code process, so we are looking at that, making sure maybe it goes from curb to grass to sidewalk, so you get, you don't go the curb to sidewalk, you get more grass and you can widen that. So those are all things we are definitely looking at when we're looking at the new subdivision code standards. Those are still currently being worked on.
Right.
But the hope is to get some more grass in that area.
Well, my concern there is, of course, I love the idea of us requiring the developer to put trees in there, and I understand that there's an inventory or will be trees placed there. But the width of the tree box is only 4 feet in width. And any tree that you want to really grow and provide possibly shade or bring value to, your streetscape, that's a pretty conservative tree box area.
So if I may, I know the question was GB or us, so we're gonna bring the question back to this particular project.
I think
for-
we can come
for a
back
minute-
to
for a
this.
minute, because what you're asking is a greater conversation. I have not talked to Charlie or Josh yet, and I have my opinion on what that double strip should be from a utility standpoint, and then the trees should be further towards the right of way where you get more of the grass that you're looking for, and then it becomes a utility fight, okay? What we call the utility corridor.
Well, I
And
think
so, speaking about this particular project, you have a 50-foot right-of-way by code.
right.
You have a 34-foot back of curb to back of curb requirement. So when you do the math, you can't fit your 5-foot sidewalk and a double strip that will plant trees without putting the sidewalk right on back of curb, which nobody wants, because all that happens is people roll up on that curb and park right on that sidewalk because we do roll curbs versus vertical curbs, because it does make driveway access, everything more convenient. It's one of the reasons why we have our trees the way we show it, because of the way the roads are so much wider, utilities go to be certain places, you can't always get the trees you want to get to. So in this case, we felt, and Parks and Recreation Committee agreed, that giving up the 1 foot of pavement, we were able to provide that in grass to allow the trees to get planted in more than a 4-foot area, because they recognize they prefer 5 to 8, more on the 8-foot side. But again, it becomes a geometrical cross section, and it's one of those, as Josh Charlie put that together, you'll start to see where everybody wants to be. My sewer wants to be here, water wants to be here, gas here, phone here, cable here, electric here, and something else. And all that's got to fit within a certain box, and that's where the planning commission will talk about it, council talk about it, say, okay, what do we want that corridor to look like? So to get back to your question, for this specific project, is because of trying to meet those conflicting requirements, we thought, planning commission agreed and recommended, G&B also didn't have any objections to it, that giving up the 1 foot of asphalt, 2 foot total, was better for the overall community and landscape and everything else. So that's why this specific project we did it, and we did it again at Canary Creek, because we did all 3 projects.
Yeah, I mean,
Good,
that's what
so-
I mentioned.
That's why
And you
we
kind
asked
of
them
touched
to
on it,
do-
whether,
no,
if we're getting this many waivers, it's like, we
Yeah.
need to look at
It's
whether,
undermining
And they
our
also did,
ordinance.
I think part of it, because if I'm not mistaken, the Parks and Rec Commission actually asked them to provide an additional 1 foot to get the trees in, which then impacted the street width. So they were also complying with what, a request from the Parks and Recreation Commission.
There's also the issue of pedestrian safety.
Correct.
you know.
And we all agree, sidewalks are back of curb and a subdivision is not the greatest idea in the world. You need at least a foot or two.
Okay,
And put all the grass on the backside of the sidewalk, but that's Ring's personal opinion, not part of the application.
so our rework of this code will help clarify this and alleviate some of this conversation.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I know there's other questions, but as far as the applicant, there are things we do feel we need to present to
Okay.
build our record.
Go ahead.
Because it's our obligation to build the record, and there's some other things that we have to address from planning commission, so,
You'd like to do that now?
if you don't mind, I know
Sure.
that there's
Please,
questions
go right
just
ahead.
general about the application, but our
I
presentation.
knew we had a lot of questions at the table, so I wanted to make sure we
Which
got
is fine,
those.
and our presentation may have addressed some of them, and may actually have more questions when it's all
Okay.
said and done, but we would at least, I don't know, humor us with 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little longer, a little less. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hutt to start off.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is David Hutt. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Morris James. This evening, I'm representing Showfield LLC, the owner and applicant for the project that was just introduced and there was questions about. I was going to begin with introductions of Mr. Lardner and Mr. Hammonds and Mr. Mumford, but that's already occurred, so I don't need to introduce them, but they are certainly obviously all part of the project. And you did hear from Mr. Mumford, who's sitting in the audience, but he's also a professional engineer with Davis, Bowen, and Friedel. As you know from the introduction and discussion, this evening we're here for a final subdivision plan approval for the community to be known as Olde Town at Whites Pond. Well, the history of Showfield, as many of you know, I recognize many of your faces as certainly people who have been here for a long time. The history of Showfield relates back to the property's acquisition beginning in 2005. Certainly this evening we're here talking about 36, almost 37 acres located right along Freeman Highway by Monroe Avenue. The subdivision application itself for these 85 single-family home lots was filed in December of 2018, and frankly it's already been referenced, but as you know there have been many discussions, meetings, and reviews of that application from December of 18. During this presentation, as Ring indicated, there are some things that the applicant developer wanted to make sure were on the record. I'm going to begin with this basic introduction or overview, and then ask Mr. Lardner to return and review some of the more specifics about the location, site plan, and design details, and how each of those things complies with the city's comprehensive plan and city's code, except for, of course, those instances where a waiver has been sought, and that's already been discussed a little bit this evening. After Mr. Lardner concludes his comments, I will return here and address some of the recommendations and proposed conditions from the Planning Commission's meeting on July 21st. Like tonight's meeting, the Planning Commission's meeting on July 21st was not a conceptual review or a sketch plan review or a preliminary site plan review. As you know, under your code, that meeting was, like this meeting, one for a final subdivision approval. And what that means is that the plans you're being asked to look at and grant final approval on tonight were prepared and revised several times by many professionals at Davis, Bowen, and Friedel, and obviously other professionals that they engage. They were reviewed and commented on multiple times by the town staff, Ms. Cornwell and her staff, as well as looked at by Mr. Mandalis, GMB and its staff. And that process, of course, led to other revisions. Some of those were already talked about in the questions that you heard. In addition to that, because of the nature of the city's code, this plan has been reviewed by agencies who have already indicated their approval. Mr. Lardner will go through some of those, but even the stormwater pond question that was there, those calculations have been made, and so through this process you can see their approval of those items. I point this out because when I come back and we address the recommendations and conditions proposed by the Planning Commission, I will be explaining a concern that some of those conditions almost seem to view this application as if it was in one of those preliminary stages of review and not a final stage of review. And I'll cover that in more detail once Mr. Lardner has reviewed the entirety of the application so that we have that broad base of knowledge from which to work. But to be clear, tonight's plans are fully engineered, final plans approved by the various state agencies, approved by the city's internal review processes and professionals. And what the applicant seeks this evening is the final green light from the city to record this subdivision plan and add these homes into the city of Lewes. Before Mr. Lardner comes, I did want to review a few basic concepts about this project, and I'll go through this quickly because it's all in the project booklet that is online. But the first is that this plan is consistent with the state strategies and spending maps that are promulgated by Delaware's Office of State Planning and Coordination. When Ms. Cornwell introduced the application a moment ago, she indicated that the subdivision had been reviewed through the state's PLUS review process. And as you know, that's a collection of a number of state agencies that all coordinate and work together to provide an analysis at a very preliminary stage of a subdivision. For example, in this matter, the PLUS review occurred I think in April of 2019, just a couple of months after the application was filed. But even at that initial stage, the Office of State Planning and Coordination's opening comments in its review letter about this application show the appropriateness of this location for this proposed subdivision. In its opening paragraph, the Office of State Planning Coordination states as follows: "This project is located in investment levels 1 and 2 according to the strategies for state policies and spending and within the city of Lewes. Investment level 1 reflects areas that are already developed in an urban or suburban fashion, where infrastructure is existing or readily available, and where future redevelopment or infill projects are expected and encouraged by state policy. Investment level 2 reflects areas where growth is anticipated by local, county, and state plans in the near-term future." Of course, the Office of State Planning and Coordination provides a high, what I'll call a high level, a 40,000-foot view of that. And as those comments indicated, this property, and as you know, is certainly within the municipal limits of the city of Lewes. Of course, the question that leaves for this council this evening is whether the subdivision is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the city code book, based upon the record that's in the project booklet, as well as in the city's file for this matter. And all of those documents, as you know, are readily accessible on the website. They're continually updated, I believe, by Ms. Cornwell and her staff. But all of those things show the project's compliance with the comprehensive plan and the city code. I asked Mr. Lardner at this time if he can walk through the various maps that help to demonstrate that, as well as the details of the subdivision itself.
For my portion of the presentation, I'll be referring to the presentation booklet that will be filed electronically on Friday and provided some paperwork to Ms. Cornwell if you prefer the paper version. Right there.
Anybody needs the paper copy?
Who has control of the maps?
Melody.
All right. We're gonna stay right there, Melanie. I'm gonna kind of walk you through. I want you to go. So the project we all know is located on the east side of Freeman Highway, south of Whites Pond, west of Schofield, and north of Baybreeze, and is highlighted yellow on the screen in front of you here in the room or at home on your computer. Exhibit 5 in the booklet is a letter to Mayor and Council requesting approval of the subdivision to be named. Don't go yet, Melanie. It's all right. Approval of the subdivision to be named Olde Town at Whites Pond, and the street names of Philly Lane, Haywagon Lane, and Paddock Way. 911 has reserved those names. They just need the official response from the city, and then they will be locked in forever. So starting here, this is Exhibit 1. This is the first map. And again, it just shows the proposed subdivision and its surroundings. Go to the next map. This is a ferment. This map shows that the project is not impacted by the 100-year flood at all, so completely uplands. If you go to the next map, this is the city's future land use map, and you will see on the right-hand side the yellow, and you'll see a little finger of red and a little rectangle of red. That is Monroe Avenue and the Gibbs commercial piece, so you can see as part of the future land use map, this has been identified as residential lands. Go to the next map. This is the 1992 aerial map showing our project. As you can see, Wolf Point had just begun construction, at least the infrastructure was in place, started to get a few houses, and Bay Breeze was just starting to pop up some homes out of the ground. If you go to the next map, this is the 2017 aerial, it's the only current one out there. Nope. Yeah, right there, sorry. At this point in time, Wolf Point is completely built out, Bay Breeze is completely built out, Jefferson Apartments has shown up, and the moorings at Lewes, and everything else. So you can kind of see how this area has grown in the past 20, almost 30 years. We're going to skip the next map. No, that's fine. We're going to skip that one. We're going to skip the next one. No, one more. No, you're right. You're doing a fine job. So this is the surrounding communities map. Again, this just shows identities of all the different residential locations, commercial locations, to show that Old Town is integrated with the surrounding areas as required by Chapter 170 of the code. If you go one more map, Melanie. This is a topographic map, a little hard to see, but you will notice that elevation of the site range from an 18 to a 10. These elevations are on the higher side when compared to other lands within the city and other critical infrastructure. So again, it's not a low-lying areas, it's more of the upland areas of the city of Lewes, which makes it, development-wise, no adverse detrimental impact to the public. Go to the next map. This is the source water protection areas. As you see, Old Town does not have a wellhead protection on it or expert recharge area, therefore there are no special requirements for development or any restrictions on the development of the land. Go to the next map. This is the 2015 state strategies map. We kind of repeated this one from our initial booklet, showing this entire area as the level 1 investment area. And the 2020 state strategies map shows this area as the same. It's unchanged, level 1, which is planned development and supported by the state. Going to the next map. This is the current zoning map, and you will see again that this property is zoned R2 single-family residential. R2 zoning district permits residential homes on 10,000 square foot lots or a base density of 4.35 units per acre. The adjusted land area for this application is 36.94 acres, of which we're requesting to build 85 single-family homes for a density of 2.30, or about 53% of the allowed density. So from a density standpoint, this project is not as dense as what's allowable by code. To take one step back, I did mention about the adjusted area. If you recall, this body did review and approve a lot line adjustment almost 2 years ago. It was going down memory lane. It was about 2 years since my first public hearing in front of Lewes Planning Commission, just a couple weeks older than that. That approval was approved with the condition that Old Town Whites Pond had to be approved. So that's why that lot line adjustment was not recorded, as it's impending the fate of tonight's public hearing. And tab C, which you don't have to go to, the link said right here, is actually the lot line adjustment plan that shows you how those lot lines got adjusted. Tab D, again, Melanie, you don't have to move anywhere, is the actual final subdivision plan, subject to tonight's meeting just on 11/17. So now I want to have you go back 5 maps, I believe, if I counted right. Right there's perfect. So this is a color rendering. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. It's a big booklet. Yeah, it's good enough. So as noted earlier in some of the questions of Councilman Ritzer, the project will use the existing Monroe Ave extended intersection with Freeman Hwy. That intersection has been existing for eons, from back when Freeman Hwy was actually almost first constructed, given the age to it. It is owned and maintained by the Delaware River and Bay Authority, which added its own unique wrinkle to this entire project. The proposed 85-unit subdivision was required to perform a traffic operational analysis and traffic signal justification study for that proposed intersection to determine the proposed impact of the subdivision. and it will have on the intersection, and if any improvements are required to mitigate any impacts. The final study was submitted to both Delaware Department of Transportation and DRBA for the review on August 20th, 2019. A copy is on file and online if anyone cares to read all 978 pages plus or minus. We did receive the final TOA review letter on January 29th, 2021. So you can see it took us quite a while to get through that process. A copy is included in Appendix 10. The final letter provided 5 recommendations for improvements to be completed as part of the project. The first recommendation is the installation of turn lanes on all 4 legs of the intersection, of which you can see shown in the aerial. There's a left turn lane going into Monroe Avenue in both directions, a right turn lane onto Monroe Avenue in both directions. Coming out of the city, there's a shared through and left and a free right. And our side, there's a left and a shared through right proposed for that intersection. Second recommendation was to install a signal and enter into a signal agreement. I'll come back to that part here in a little bit. The third recommendation was installing a sidewalk along Monroe Avenue to the Trailhead parking lot. It didn't quite go along Monroe Avenue. We found a kind of a shortcut to get up into the Trailhead, which DOT agreed with. So we did provide that connection to the Trailhead parking lot that Denrec had put in as part of their Junction Breakwater Trail. That's the parking lot on this side of the library, between the library and Monroe Avenue. That's actually a Trailhead parking lot maintained by Parks and Rec. And we have a sidewalk that connects to it.
May I interrupt you real quick?
Sure.
Is that shortcut that you just described, is that a new development in the plan, or was
That came about after we talked about the city dedicating right away. That came up like in November of last year.
Right.
That's
Okay.
how late in the game they came to the table of requiring it.
And that actually connects to basically the trailhead,
That's correct.
Right.
not along Monroe.
Correct.
Okay, I'll have to look for that in the plans, thank you. I understand, I just want to be familiar with it.
Okay.
The fourth recommendation was a vehicular connection to Schofield and a vehicular connection to Bayberry's. The fifth and final recommendation was pedestrian improvements, and I won't go into all 14 of those improvements, just they're required. The applicant has designed a signalized intersection with auxiliary lanes for all 4 approaches, as I just mentioned. We designed the pedestrian connection to the Trailhead itself. We designed all recommended pedestrian improvements, and we did make a vehicular connection to Schofield. The only item the applicant did not complete is the vehicular connection to Bayberry's, and that was agreed upon during the preliminary consent that no vehicular connection was going to be provided. But we did make a pedestrian connection to the Junction Breakwater Trail and to the cul-de-sac as part of Bayberry's. All right, let's take a trip down the site there. So we're going to start at Monroe Avenue, intersection with Freeman Highway. So you come south on the project all the way down to Battle Mixer Drive. So that would be through Schofield. That's the 32-foot wide street we talked about before we got into testimony. Monroe Avenue currently serves an active, approved commercial business and Cunningham properties. Off of Monroe Avenue, we then have 2 roads that head, technically it's south, to be somewhat correct, southwest, towards Bayberry's Estates. Paddock Way, which is the southern road, will turn around and will end at Philly Lane. And then Philly Lane will end just before the Junction Breakwater Trail. We provided the right-of-way all the way to the property line so that should Bayberry's change their mind or the city of Lewes, we had the means to make that connection, but we did not actually physically put the road all the way to the property line. Again, that was an agreement amongst all parties that would at least satisfy the concern in the future so we didn't cut ourselves off at the knees.
But it does connect to the trail.
It does connect, there's a sidewalk that connects to the trail, that is correct.
That's right.
A pedestrian connection, again, will be provided, bollards will be added to prevent vehicular traffic from crossing that, so that way the vehicles cannot drive across the grass or anything else. A private access haywagon lane will be constructed to provide access to the centralized amenity area. That amenity area consists of the pool house, and some picnic tables. There's also some open, organized play areas, I like to call them, kind of to the north of that pool house. That way they can be used by whomever, depending on the time of the year, so that way it's not one sport activity or the other. It can be morphed into anything 365 days a year. Stormwater management will be provided by two 48-hour extended detention ponds that will discharge into Whites Pond that ultimately outfalls into the Lewes and Rehoboth Canal. And as mentioned earlier, as Mr. Richard had asked, it was analyzed, including drainage going into those ponds and from Schofield, so all that has been reviewed by Sussex Conservation District. Almost all lots abut open space. There's two lots right off Philly Lane and two on the left. Do not all 83 other lots actually abut open space. There is a 25-foot landscape buffer between Olde Town, Whites Pond, and Schofield that will contain a mix of trees, as well as a swale and inlets for drainage, that way we're not ponding water between the two projects. There is some landscaping in the existing junction breakwater trail between the proposed lots and Bayberries, there to your southwest. And there is also a 25-foot wide landscape buffer between the proposed lots and the right-of-way to Freeman Hwy, when excluding the rear yard setback. So now when we measure from the property line of the nearest proposed lot to the pavement of Freeman Hwy, that distance is 61.04 feet away. So there is 60 foot from the property line to pavement. Add another 15 foot, because that's what the setback requirement is. You're now 76 feet from the pavement. That is consistent with other residential properties along Freeman Hwy. So this is not out of character with that location.
It's consistent with what's in Bayberries.
Bayberries and the 6 or 7 houses diagonal from this project.
Ring, excuse me.
Yes,
That's
sir.
76 feet. That's from the rear wall of the houses, is that correct?
That's correct.
To the
Pavement.
pavement. Thank you, thank you. Just want to make sure.
All lots exceed the 10,000 square feet and all the setbacks meet the city code. We did provide a response to the open space requirements in Exhibit 14, and the project meets or exceeds those requirements. As the open space consists of both passive and active open space, it exceeds 28% of the total project area. And the amenities will be open to the residents of Olde Town and Whites Pond and their guests. It is continuous within the subdivision and adjacent lands, and the size and location provides adequate access to the residents. So you can see it is connected together. You can get from the furthest west of the project, southwest, all the way to Whites Pond through open connectivity of open space. As mentioned earlier, stormwater management is provided by 2 wet extended detention ponds. They do detain what we call the resource protection event, the 1-year storm, for 48 hours, so it will discharge over those 48 hours. And plantings within the aquatic bench will remove nitrogen and phosphorus. The ponds were also designed for both the conveyance event, which is the 10-year event, and the flooding event, which is the 100-year storm event. Whites Pond was evaluated to ensure that the water surface elevation does not increase by more than 0.05 feet or just over a ½ an inch. And that is the standard within the code. So Whites Pond is not affected by this project at all through the design of the stormwater. All stormwater was designed to meet or exceed the 2019 sediment stormwater regulations as promulgated by DNREC and effective on February 1st, 2019. In addition, we are aware that there are existing drainage problems at the intersection of Monroe Avenue extended in Gibbs property that were caused by either the junction breakwater trail or the Lewes Library construction. Our design improves them as part of this project. In addition, the project is not impacted by sea level rise as reviewed by our in-house coastal engineer. So I know that has become a topic of concern of the city. We did run that analysis, and sea level rise does not impact the subdivision. Water, sewer, and electric will be provided by the Board of Public Works. The Board of Public Works engineer, GMB, has reviewed the project and has no objections to approval of the plans as stated in their review letter. As noted by Mr. Hutt, it was reviewed by Plus. A copy of our response is included in Exhibit 3 of that booklet. And Exhibit 6 contains a soils report performed by John D. Hines and Associates. That was for road and stormwater, and you can extrapolate some of that data to show that the soils are suitable for the proposed development. Exhibit 4 is the written response to all 22 components of Chapter 170-19E of the City Code, and was updated and read for this presentation. A few little red notes, clarified some numbers. I promise I will not bore you by reading all 22 comments, but it's like Prego, it's in there. It does comply with Chapter 170. The subdivision is well integrated into the existing terrain and surrounding landscape, with perimeter buffers and lot sizes comparable to adjacent subdivisions. The site does not contain wetlands Now, with floodplains, there are no natural or historical features on the site. The project provides 10.38 acres of open space, 28% of the project area, and again, as noted, all units are adjacent to open space except for the 2 lots I pointed out a few minutes ago. There is a small pocket of trees being removed in the left-hand corner, lots 16 through 20, I believe are the names. If you're familiar with that area, it's the one's got a couple of trees, it's all grown over everything else. We've had an arborist go out and look at it, we've had a landscape architect, and they all agree that the trees can't be saved with the growth. Parks and Recreation Committee reviewed that, and they also agreed that they're not worth saving to remove them and plant trees that will then survive.
Is that
what's
that
going on.
big clump of trees in the?
There's 2 clump of trees. There's one on one side of the trail on our side, then there's the side on Denrek. That's not on our property. So that clump of trees is going to stay. It's the clump on our side that's
Okay.
going to be removed and replaced.
It's right where the trail curves.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
Up there. in
Not the
top
clump of
left
trees
corner.
is staying.
Not the big clump that's colored. That's
Right.
staying.
Right, it's in the top left corner.
Top left corner, yes, sir.
Oh, okay, okay.
It kind of buffers that corner when you're on the tree.
Actually, there's been a lot of damage to those trees from storms, and so they're
Yeah,
pretty
right,
much
right.
broken.
Grade changes have been minimized to the extent practical to meet code requirements for drainage. As mentioned, we're talking about 9,000 cubic yards of dirt needed to meet all those different requirements. The project is screened from neighboring properties and roadways with landscape buffers. Speaking of landscaping, there are a few areas. Can you go to PDF page 18? See if I can guess right now. No, you're fine. I'll keep on down. That's good right there. So you notice there's 3 blocks of trees that are on one side of the road, they don't cross over on the other side.
Right.
That is due to utilities being within that roadway, so we can't have a conflict between landscaping and utilities. So in this case, the utilities won. Parks and Recreation Committee did review and approve this landscaping plan as presented before you this evening. And they also, asked for the alternate request, but recognizing utilities, you can't have landscaping utilities. I don't think BPW would be very happy if we were to do that. Like I said, stormwater management and erosion control meets or exceeds DENREC standards and regulations. The roads are designed to meet city standards. Sidewalks provided on both sides of the street with an interconnection to junction breakwater trail, so you have direct access to the trail. The area property values will be further enhanced with this community. The proposed project does not negatively impact the area roadways, and improvements have been designed to mitigate any impact, specifically the intersection of Monroe Avenue and Freeman Hwy. The project will be fully funded by the developer, and no cost will be borne by the city. Additional screening will enhance Freeman Hwy, but Freeman Hwy is not a scenic byway. The byway stops before it gets to this part of Freeman Hwy. Finally, the project will create temporary jobs, and residents will provide additional tax revenue for the city and customers for BPW. I will close this portion of the presentation by saying that the project has been reviewed by the Lewes Planning Commission as part of the preliminary consent process. The landscaping and open space plans were reviewed and approved by the Parks and Recreation Committee as presented to you this evening. The town's and city's engineer has reviewed the construction documents and noted they have no objection to approval of the plans. The Sussex Conservation District has reviewed and approved the detailed sediment and stormwater plan. The Office of State Fire Marshal has reviewed and approved the site plan to include hydrant spacings and road widths and the like. DENREC has issued a notice of intent to discharge stormwater during construction and a wastewater construction permit to construct the sanitary sewer system. Office of Drinking Water has issued a certificate to construct for a water distribution system, and DELDOT/DRBA has issued a letter of no objection. The entrance plans have been finalized except for the signal plan, as DELDOT has once again changed how they want the signal to operate. As they now want to use a Wavetronics device in lieu of loop detectors. So now we're trying to figure out how to integrate Wavetronics into the signal. The signal agreement is still in draft form and awaiting final sign-off from DELDOT and DRBA, and that can't be finalized until they approve the signal plans, of which time that agreement will then be presented to the City of Lewes for review, as well as the applicants, Schofield LLC and Gibbs Commercial, as they will be the 5th signatory of that agreement.
Yeah.
Those are semantics. I don't want to make light of that. There truly are semantics as far as how you loop. The design's done. It's really just changing loop detectors to a camera system, and then the agreement just has all the final, here's all that's required. So from a design-wise, it's truly semantics. We just don't have that approval. So I want to be forthright enough comment to say where that truly stands today.
Excuse me, Ring, that was a description of this Wavetronic is what you were just describing?
We'll say it's a glorious camera to detect traffic.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's the best way I can describe it.
Okay.
Well, there already is a camera at the DRVA
Um,
station.
Will that connect back to the state system
Yeah,
that they
that's why
have?
DelDOT's taking ownership of the signal so they can integrate it into their system.
Right,
That's why
thank
this
you.
agreement has gotten a little interesting because, yeah.
Thank you, just wanted to clarify that, yeah.
As noted earlier, we have asked for a waiver regarding the street widths and a waiver regarding approval of the plan without an entrance permit, because again, we can't get an entrance permit without a recorded plan, so we're a little gratuitous process as far as that goes. That is it for my testimony, and I'll be happy to answer questions when David's done with his piece. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David, you want to talk to us some more?
Briefly, Mr. Lardner has just laid a great foundation in addition to what's in the project booklet. And I wanted to address the 4 recommendations and 7 conditions that were within the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval to this body. And some of those I'm going to truncate what I was going to say, because a lot of it was questioned pretty thoroughly in the opening questions that members of council had. And the first one, I'm going to skip that because we'll come to that with respect to the condition. And there is a chart in the project workbook. It was multicolored and looked something like that.
It was like
Around
on
page
330 for 330s.
It's right near the end. I do.
We can get it. I can get it.
I don't have, mine's not green.
And actually, I have other copies. If somebody wants to,
Tell us which one is blue.
What page did you say it was on?
3:30.
Like down the 330s.
Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna ask for a one of it. You got one.
Can I actually have one?
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's the same thing.
Okay, good. Thank you. They just break it down into green.
I got it, thank you.
As is indicated, you can see there's 2 columns. One is for the Planning Commission's proposed recommendation, and then on the right-hand side is the applicant or developer response.
Right, thank you.
And as I said, I'm going to skip the first one, and because that we'll address when we get to the conditions. On the second recommendation, there's encouragement to DRBA to replace the fence along Freeman Highway, and certainly the applicant has no objection to encouraging DRBA, but the body of influence here is not the applicant. It would be the mayor and council, and certainly there'd be no objection, and hopefully the mayor and council would encourage DRBA to enhance the area there along Freeman Highway. But I don't think that that's an applicant or developer responsibility as much as a mayor and council, and that's probably what the Planning Commission intended for that. The third proposed recommendation is approval of the waiver, and that has been discussed at length, so I will not say anything further about that waiver. The fourth recommendation was approval of the subdivision plan without the entrance permit. I think Ms. Cornwell said it, Mr. Lardner said it, that the city's code says an applicant has to have an entrance permit. DelDOT says you have to record the subdivision plan, and so an applicant gets whipsawed between DelDOT's process and the city, and in this case, DRBA's process. Because as Ring indicated a moment ago, this is a 5-party agreement ultimately between the River and Bay Authority, DelDOT, the city itself, of course, and then Mr. Gibbs's commercial enterprise as well as this subdivision. Turning to the proposed conditions, the first condition again relates to Monroe Avenue, and it also relates to that first recommendation. And what the proposed condition was, of course, was that access to the development is provided when the signal is installed. And the concern here is twofold. One is what I just referenced a moment ago about the number of parties and agencies necessary to approve the final plans for the signal. But second is keeping Monroe Avenue open. Monroe Avenue is currently open and usable by whether it's the Cunningham properties or Mr. Gibbs Commercial, and it sounded like people from Schofield presently use Monroe Avenue to get to the city. And so in lieu of stating that access is provided when the signal is installed, you can see there's a proposed condition there that allows Schofield LLC to move forward with the installation of infrastructure in a limited number of homes while the signal agreement is being finalized and the signal design and construction is finalized and installed.
Mr. Hutt, did you mind just tell me how you came to that calculus of the 14, is just in terms of that number? Yeah.
That calculus, I'm going to ask Mr. Lardner if he could fill in. That number came from a discussion, I believe, with DRBA, but I was not directly involved.
Okay.
That's why we'll ask.
I mean, you don't need to show me the algorithm, but.
The algorithm, so that was the discussion of what the number is, because they recognize that the improvement is quite hefty from a cost standpoint and time. So, talking to DRBA, it wasn't a worksheet that came out, it was kind of like, hey, this 14 permits makes sense, or kind of, yeah, that makes sense, kind of allows smaller homes to get open, allows some cash flow. The one thing we didn't really state at the beginning is that this is not a builder tie-in. So it'll be just a show for your buyer lot, like a drone builder, or whatever else. So who knows how long it take 14 people to build. It proves like Schofield, they built in no time. So that's where the 14 permits came from. And the other part, to add to what Dave was saying, is the signal, while being designed and approved, it's up to DelDOT and DRBA when that signal is installed and when they turn it on.
Operational.
And that'll be part of, this is where we come to council, say, when you get that signal agreement, you can try to weigh in on when you think that should be turned on. Again, that's going to be subject to agreement with 5 different parties that we developer have zero control on. Because DelDOT owns all the above ground signal and some of the underground. We developer do not. We're doing all the pavement, the turn lanes, everything else is by DelDOT. That's what makes this whole thing interesting. That's why if it's tied to us, we don't control it. That's what the signal agreement comes into play.
I would note that the number of lots is less than 20% that you've asked for, so that's a pretty low number. Thank you.
Moving to the second proposed condition from the Planning Commission, and this is one of the ones that I referenced in my opening comments. The proposed condition is to have at least 10 types of plant species. Be sure that that's what's planted in the stormwater management ponds. And the concern here is that there was nothing in the record about whether or not 10 species is superior in any way to 5 species. But the other concern, and this is why I mentioned that it's almost a treatment of this application or this stage of the application as if it's in a preliminary or conceptual stage, is Mr. Lardner went through in detail all the various approvals that are here, including the Parks and Recreation Committee. And what the applicant doesn't want is for those species to have to be approved by the Sussex Conservation District, then back to Parks and Recreation Commission, and then back here, because this is a final approval. And so those things have already been reviewed. And certainly, I'm sure that condition is well-intentioned. There's nothing here to say that condition is not well-intentioned, but it doesn't reflect where this application is in the process, as those types of plant species and such were already vetted through the system and approved. You have the Sussex Conservation District approval as part of your exhibit notebook. And frankly, that's the final body that has to approve the types of plant species within a stormwater pond and then talk about how they're maintained.
So you simply just don't want it to come back through you again?
Correct.
May I interrupt you there? Excuse me, sir. I'm going to ask Glenn a question about that. It seems to me that as a city, that we have certain privileges that, where we can exercise some discretion. And just because something meets the Sussex County Conservation Corps requirements doesn't mean that we might have a higher standard. Is that not true?
You can have a higher standard in 2 instances. One, it's codified that your standard is higher than Sussex County's because you are a municipality and you get to have your own city code. So it's either codified at a higher standard or during the development review process, you identify a health, safety, or welfare concern that allows you to attach a condition to address that concern, which could be a higher standard than even you find in your code. But it's really in those two limited circumstances.
And the health that we could be speaking of this, instead of it being citizens, it could be the health of the trees, right? Is the code just reads health, right?
Well, it's a health, welfare, and safety concern that relates to the community as a whole.
Yeah, and that includes the trees, right? I try to be creative here.
If you're a tree. Have you ever seen the movie The Lorax?
Let's come on.
Good try, Tim.
Okay,
I'm trying.
all right.
Go ahead, please.
All right. The third proposed condition from the Planning Commission dealt with replacing sugar maple trees with an oak tree or other native tree species. And actually, if I may, I'm going to go back to the second one. If the city was so intended to keep that type of a condition, the proposed condition, again, the developer's first position is that condition not be included. If the condition is included, then we have a proposed language there that says we only have to go back to the Sussex Conservation District and obtain their approval, because they ultimately have the authority over stormwater management ponds. Anyway, so that was what that condition. But again, the first position would be that be removed. With respect to moving to the third condition, that dealt with the replacement of sugar maple trees with oak trees or other native tree species. And many of the same concerns, I don't need to repeat them there, about the process that the applicant has been through. And the applicant has no problem, the trees haven't been planted, so it's just as easy to plant an oak tree as it is a sugar maple tree, certainly. And so we would ask that if that is a condition, and there's no objection to that condition, that there not be a requirement that we go back to the Parks and Recreation Commission again, but this be a final approval.
Right.
With respect to the fourth condition, that dealt with the spacing of trees. And as you can see, I don't know that we object to the language so much, or I'm sorry, to the condition so much as the language. And what we say here is that the street trees will be evenly spaced throughout the development except where there are utilities. Mr. Lardner showed you on the image why there are no street trees there. And in fact, after the Planning Commission meeting in July, we went back through the records. When I say we, Randy and his staff went back through the records and noticed that there is actually correspondence that I think that involved GMB and Ms. Cornwell about these actual locations, and as Mr. Lardner indicated, utilities won, and that's where there are no trees there. And again, the Planning Commission's concern is that it doesn't have a uniform appearance of a tree-lined street, but as you've heard this evening, there is a good reason for that. And the language that we propose, we think, better suits that condition. The fifth requirement, and this was talked about at the outset of the meeting, so I will cover this very quickly, but it's to require an open connection to Monroe Avenue to the Schofield development. There is no objection to that condition. The language has been proposed to be modified, reflecting that. Certainly the city is the street belongs to the city, so in my opinion, Mr. Mandalis is certainly your attorney, he can advise you, but I think the only person who can close the city street would be the city itself. But if that, I recognize that there has been concern about this issue, and so at least with respect to putting people on record and on notice of that, the proposed condition says that the final site plan as well as the declaration of restrictive covenants for the future property owners association would contain express language that nobody within this community could close the street without going to mayor and city council, which frankly I think they have to do anyway. I think it repeats the law.
Do you know, Mr. Hutt, did you represent the developer and create the documents for the Schofield community?
I assisted in the creation.
Okay, and was there a provision in those documents, in their HOA documents, that addresses this business of closing the street?
That I do not know off the top
Okay,
of my
we need
head.
to have an answer to that question.
I look at far too many
I can
association
imagine.
documents to recall exactly.
Sure.
what's in it.
I'd like to have an answer to that question.
The sixth condition as proposed by the Planning Commission is that the amenities are for the use of Olde Town and Whites Pond residents and their guests, and that would be something that's located within, again, those restrictive covenants for the HOA documents, and that's what's reflected in the proposed condition from the applicant. The final proposed condition from the Planning Commission was that additional tree, shrubs, or fencing be installed along Freeman Highway to provide a continuous buffer between Freeman Highway and the rear of the homes. And the applicant, as you can see, if you're looking at the chart, would ask that this condition not be included, as this would likely require continued review by various agencies. There is a landscaping buffer that's provided already. Mr. Lardner went through the distances in addition to the buffer that's included. And the condition as it's proposed was simply that there be additional trees, shrubs, or fencing, and that could quickly turn into an eye of the beholder test, and I think the city may have a different vision of what that means versus the applicant, and rather than something that is ambiguous and difficult to enforce, that the applicant would request that that be removed and they install the landscape buffer that was approved by the Parks and Recreation Commission. I went through that sort of quickly because we have the chart in front of us. Certainly myself, Mr. Lardner, and Mr. Hammonds are happy to answer any questions that Mayor and Council may have.
Okay, great, thank you. I think we, unless there are questions from the table right away, I think we need to hear from the public at this point. Unless, Nick, did you have anything you wanted to add before?
No, I was just going to say, I wasn't sure exactly what you were asking, Tim, with respect to the language in the Schofield Declaration.
Right, I was just trying to figure out, I understand that the city has responsibility and will have control over the Monroe Avenue that's inside the city. That's not being questioned. The question is about that part of Monroe, which is in fact in the county, which is in Schofield. And I'd like to know if there are rights that have already been assigned to the HOA where they can determine if they want that road to be open or closed.
There are not. So they are public streets, privately maintained. However, as we've stated, any change to that would be a change to the approved plan. So if you're closing a road, you're changing an approved plan. So it would have to go back before the Planning Commission.
The county planning commission.
Correct. Sussex County Planning Zone.
And the fire marshal.
And the fire.
And the fire.
So there's nothing there, you see.
Right, okay.
There's not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would you indulge me and let me ask one more question? Thank you. And my question probably is directed to Ring. With respect to the fence along Freeman Highway that the Planning Commission has asked that it be removed, and I think they suggested a split rail fence or something more decorative. And your response is that this is not a matter for the developer. My question is, when I look at that fence row, I think of that as a property line between the right-of-way from DRBA's land right-of-way and the developer's parcel. Am I mistaken by that? Is that fence actually on DRBA's property, or is it on the developer's property?
Well, it looks like it's on the developers. When we were
I
standing
realize
there.
what it looks like, but I just want to clarify that.
Can we go back to a site plan and maybe look at the existing fence?
And
I
that's my
believe
last
from
question.
previous testimony, it was stated that that fence was on the
That's what I
DRBA
thought.
property and was in the right
I
of
think
way.
I think it's DRBA's fence, and it actually runs all the way from the bridge on both sides of the road, so
Well,
it's that.
I just wanted to clarify that because
I
I'm
know
gonna
when
double
we,
check, but I'm pretty sure.
I would appreciate that.
I know when we did the library and the trailhead, that fence there was replaced by DRBA. So that fence does not belong to the city. It was on, but they did replace it in its entirety.
Okay.
I think it's the same way.
Okay.
This plan's a little small for the read, and I know what's on the exhibit book isn't the full construction document, so I will give you a definitive answer.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Won't be tonight,
No,
but I
that's
believe,
okay.
the record may be left open. I will give you the answer, but I'm 99% sure it is DRB's fence.
Yeah.
It's the same style of fencing that's on the other,
Yeah.
across the road.
Hence why we think it's more appropriate to go to DRBA.
Sure.
Because they have the ownership and maintenance of it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, now we are ready to hear from the public. Rob, anybody here? Please, Rob.
So I am not the developer or the owner of this property. I happen to be the adjacent, well, not adjacent, across the street. You've heard of the Gibbs commercial property. I got involved
Can you
Maybe-
just state your name for the record?
I'm sorry, Robert Gibbs. The owner of the property is actually Gibbs Company, Inc. So I got involved about a year and a half or more ago when I saw one of the early notices in the paper and a preliminary plan, and I realized it was due or overdue time to get involved in at least making sure that as the intersection was designed, that I protected my rights as to my property, and to make sure I know a little bit about design, very little about design of intersections, and I know that there are distances back from the main intersection where other roads come in, and mine, the original alignment was coming in very close to the edge of my building. So I got up with George Miles and Buer, and they were very cooperative, actually realigned that, and my property and the anticipated traffic with increased commercial space was all worked into the design, and the alignment of the road going from, out of Olde Town and right straight across into my property is now lined up, and so I'm in favor of this overall. I'll just say that I think at this point, I think the developers have done an extremely good job with taking into consideration an awful lot of parameters and governing and approving bodies and so forth. And it's been a pleasure to work with them. Just on this limited intersection, if DelDOT and DRBA were on the same sort of level, we'd all be happy.
It's been quite a process.
Yeah, but there are a lot of hands in the pot as far as this intersection and traffic agreement are concerned. So everybody's working toward a good direction.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs.
Yes, sir. Please identify yourself, if you would, please.
Hi, my name is Charlie Pisano. I actually live on Inlet Place. And I guess it's kind of a moot point now because you're not going through there, which I'm very grateful. I think we had a vote that was 98% against Bay Breeze. And I think the 2%, I don't use the term skin in the game, but there's rumors going around there was a reason for that 2%. I don't know exactly what, but so really there was 100%. And as far as changing our minds, we're never going to change our minds, okay? Zero chance of that. So I really would appreciate it if you just take the clause out, because destroying a neighborhood and a cul-de-sac is a disgrace, actually. I mean, I can't even believe you were even thinking of doing it. So I'm grateful you're not, but I just wanted to reinforce, how we feel about that.
Okay.
And that's it.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, please come forward, identify yourselves if you would, please.
Yes, my name is Joe Pica, and I am also a resident of Bay Breeze. And I wanted to give just a little more context about the residents' perspective on this. I am not a member of the HOA board, but I do monitor, at their request, the development both north of our development and south. So I've also been watching the Mitchell property and the progress. Fortunately, at this point, the non-progress, but it will pick up this fall, is what we hear, of that development as well. At your last council meeting, a comment was made with regards to the issue about paving the entrance to our development, that we were somehow trying to maintain private roads or privacy of our roads. Nothing could be further from the truth. My wife and I have been owners of our house for 16 years. We moved into that house because it was in Lewes. We want to be associated with Lewes. Residents throughout the development are deeply involved in the life of Lewes. What we don't want is to become a frontage road from Kings Highway down to Freeman Highway. And we are concerned about the direction of traffic on Kings. We are concerned about the proposal from DelDOT to change the traffic pattern on Kings, not necessarily to improve it. I won't use an improvement term, but I will use change it. That appears scheduled now for the fiscal year 2027 and 2028. It's been moved back a little bit in the most recent capital program projections. And of course, those changes are to dualize Kings Highway from Dartmouth to Gills Neck, then add an additional turn lane from Gills Neck coming into the intersection with Freeman Highway and Kings Highway. At that point, there will be a traffic circle as projected by DelDOT. We don't know how close that traffic circle comes to our entrance to our development. What we do know is, at this point, DelDOT recognizes that there's going to be a lot more traffic on Kings Highway. Anyone who has to live with that traffic, as we do, daily trying to get out of our development, realizes the pickup, the volume of that traffic has increased notably this summer. And it happens episodically throughout the year at other times as well. The question then is, how do we accommodate that increased traffic, and whether the changes being proposed by DelDOT will be effective in doing that. I think it's very prudent on the part of the residents of our community to say that given the unknowns, given the fact that we don't know what's going to happen with the volume of traffic, we don't know exactly when DelDOT's efforts to, in their view, improve things is going to be undertaken, that we don't want to see our community becoming a shortcut for residents in our new neighboring community. Now, whether those concerns, those fears are overblown, I think you can understand why residents who live in the area immediately affected, as Mr. Pisano does, and as our other neighbor here does as well, are concerned. We are a community primarily of retired persons. Our principal means of exercise is walking. We walk in a circle, approximately a mile, around our development. We do not have sidewalks. All of us walk in the road. We get angry with those neighbors who push the speed a little bit high, and so we requested, and the city recently installed, a sign kind of reminding people to go slowly. We've also requested a sign, and the city has cooperated, to indicate that it was not a through street, that there was no exit from that development. Strangely enough, my house was identified as the location of a pizza store this summer by Google. And so we had lots of traffic coming to the end of the development and suddenly coming to a halt and looking at their maps and trying to figure out, well, where in the world is the pizza shop? I thought we might supplement our income a little bit. Our concern then, I think, is a reasonable one. And so we are pleased that at this point, the recommendation that has come from the Planning Commission not include vehicle connection. If the city decides to re-examine this in the future, we hope that you will have an ongoing conversation and communication with us. I would also point out that as a frequent user of the bike path, the Junction and Breakwater Trail, that I do not think it makes much sense for the city to initiate an intersection over a bike trail, which already has to accommodate a number of roads. I realize that. We have to accommodate the bike trail crossing over Gills Neck. I don't think the city should be initiating additional crossings, vehicular crossings. And so I would hope that this also holds in the future so that you don't create new intersections. That is a blind corner for those of you who may have ridden it in the past. And there are lots of people who think that that they're in a bike race and racing from downtown Lewes in the direction of Rehoboth, who don't realize that it's a blind curve there. Now that they're tearing down the trees there, that might be a little bit less blind, but my suspicion is that there will be new plantings that will replace that. So that's especially a bad place to put in a new intersection.
Okay.
So I hope we don't do that.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Anyone else care to speak? Yes, ma'am. Please identify yourself. Pull the microphone down so we can hear you. Anyway.
Hi, I'm Edith Cross. I live on Inlet Place. And our streets were forever being taken over by the city because they're too narrow and we have no sidewalks. And I just want you to keep that. We can't get out of our community now, so all we need is a few hundred more cars that are anxious to get to Gills Neck Road or whatnot. It's a bad situation. And I don't know, living there, every time there's a rainstorm and the ferry comes in, Kings Highway is gridlocked all the way to Wawa. And we have to plan our entrances and exits in between the ferry. And heaven forbid if they let you in.
The traffic light may help that.
Pardon?
When they put the traffic light in there, you may see some changes.
I think it will be better. At least they'll have to stop someplace.
Exactly.
But just keep that in mind. We're just a little tiny community, and everything Mr. Pike has said and my neighbor said is absolutely true.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else care to speak? Any other comments? Melanie, do you have anybody have raised their hand online? Yes. Okay, do you want to bring them up? Frankie, did you have a question?
She must have done it by mistake.
Can you hear you?
Are you asking for me?
Yes, you
Hi,
have your
this is
hand
Frankie
raised.
Bradshaw. This is Frankie Bradshaw. Thank you, Mayor. If the plan is approved, I'd like to ask that the planting's recommendation be shifted to emphasizing native trees and shrubs. The specificity of the number 10 could then be changed to just say a variety of native trees and shrubs. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Frankie. Do you have anybody else on the Zoom that has raised their hand? It doesn't look like it. Okay, anyone else here in the room? Doesn't, one more time. Anyone else here in the room care to comment? All right, well, hearing no other further comments, again, we'll keep the comment period open until noon on Friday, September the 10th. So if anyone cares to write between now and then or provide email correspondence with us, please get it in before noon by noon, not later than noon on Friday, September the 10th. And this will appear, we will plan for this to appear on our September 13th agenda. And just in time for the rain to be finished.
Timing's everything.
Couldn't have finished 5 minutes earlier.
No. All right, with that. You don't control the weather? Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. I think the usually Lieutenant Governor controls it. Okay, anyway, if there's no further comments, I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
A second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Again, thank you for coming out tonight. It looks like we may, we need to
Stacking chairs or something?
How's that for timing?
The rapidity.
Sky, just so we know. My umbrella's in the car.
Yeah.
It's not gonna do you much good in your car.
I know.
Talk